Hi, this is Rabbi Orlofsky, and welcome to the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. And whether you're watching with our friends and producers over at Torah Anytime, or wherever you watch and listen to your podcast, as always, we're excited to have you along. And if it applies, please remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe. I remember it all. All right, and our sponsorship this week is from Malka Finkel for her father's Yarhzeit, Avraham Yosef ben Shmuel, Chavtes Teves, and she actually put in a request for a topic. So she said in a recent question and answer, the Purim Chanukah question was about Haman, who came from Esav, but is referred to Paras Umadai being the gullus. The rabbi said it's a good question and one that deserved a whole podcast. So I want to know if I could sponsor that share. Well, here we are. Works out well. Let's go into this. And I happen to think this is especially appropriate as this podcast will be coming out just before Asar B'Teves. And Asar B'Teves is, of course, in many ways, the darkest day in Jewish history. Tisha B'Av is, of course, the day of crying and suffering forever. But Asar B'Teves is the day that it all went wrong. That was the beginning of the end. And as you know, the Beis HaMikdash was set on fire towards the end of Tisha B'Av and mostly burnt on the 10th of Av. And nonetheless, we celebrate the 9th of Av because we always go by the beginning of the tragedy. That is worse than the tragedy itself in many ways. The beginning of the tragedies of the Churban. And you know, of the days that commemorate the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, there are 4 days. In chronological order, it's Asar B'Teves, when Bavel established the siege around Jerusalem, which was the beginning of the end. And Shavos B'Tammuz, when they broke through the walls of Jerusalem. And Tisha B'Av, when they burnt down the Beis HaMikdash. And Som Gedalia, when finally the last remnants of the Jews in Eretz Yisrael ran away or were destroyed after Gedalia was killed. So this is really the beginning of the process. It set into motion everything that later became the Daled Gullus. And the Maharal speaks about this at length, of course, in their mitzvah, the idea of the Daled Gullus. This was alluded to in the creation of the world. V'aretz hayisa tov v'vo v'choshech al pnei sahom. Those 4 words are references to the Daled Malchios. When we look at the story of the Bris Ben Absarim, you see Avraham there are 4 terms referring to the 4 Gulios. In Nebuchadnezzar's vision that Daniel explains of the statue with the gold head, right, and the silver and the copper and the feet of clay, making reference also to the Daled Malchios. The idea of these 4 nations that are going to exile the Jewish people is built into creation. And the number 4, we've spoken about this many times already, the difference between the number 4 and the number 6. Number 4 is just down here. And it always limits us down here, the number 4. And that's why we went down to Mitzrayim for 400 years, because Mitzrayim was described as Mitzrayim, a makom that was tsar, as opposed to Eretz Yisrael, Eretz Chemda Tova or Rechava, wide open. But Mitzrayim was narrow. 4 is limiting. That's why Migdal Bavel built, it says, a Migdal and an ear, going across and going up. It was a 4. If you can imagine the letter Daled, which, by the way, might look like another symbol that you might be familiar with around this time of year. which, by the way, is also associated with Asar B'Teves, because Asar B'Teves is a combination of 3 separate days of tragedy: the 8th, the 9th, and the 10th. On the 8th, Ptolemy forced the Chachamim, 70 Chachamim, to translate the Torah into Greek. And that was described as a day as dark for the Jewish people as the day that the luchos were broken. So that 8th itself was a tragedy. And Asar B'Teves, of course, was the siege. And what happened on the 9th? So there's 2 different views of what happened on the 9th. One is that that's when Ezra Sofer died, and Ezra was associated with Malachi, and he was the last of the Nevi'im, and we lost Nevuah on that day, on the 9th. And there are those who say that was the day that Yoshka Pandrik was born. If you're not familiar with that term, sometimes he's known as Yeshu. And if you're not familiar with that term, sometimes he's referred to as Jesus. And the 9th of Teves is seen as being his birthday. These were different tragedies that all have the same theme to it, and that is the Torah was limited when we translated it. Because when it's written in Lashon HaKodesh, there are infinite meanings that are implied in it through drash, through remez, through the letters, through the gematria. When you translate into another language, you don't get that. Very hard to capture the Torah in another language. I remember seeing an old translation that translated pre-bitna as fruit of the womb. I'm pretty sure that's a type of undergarments, fruit of the womb. But, that's a very poor translation. Then you have more modern translations. Yeah. Rabbi Dr. Gottlieb was very upset once. He told me. He says he was looking at the art scroll, and when it says V'lo sasa kol malacha, they translate it as work. And he says to me, how much work do we put into explaining that malacha is not work? It's a creative act. It's not work. It's not labor. Yeah. Avodah, that's labor, right? That's work. Malacha is something that is creative, a creative type of action. Translations are always tricky. My brother-in-law, David Lichtman, was speaking once. We were both at an event. And he says, the Targum Onkelos, which is a rendering of the Torah into Aramaic. And I thought, what a clever word, rendering. Rendering is not a translation. A translation is a literal translation. A rendering means that it has inherent in it a commentary, so that when it explains a word, any translation has within it a commentary. Moshe Shapiro was speaking once in Silver Spring, Maryland, and he was speaking in Hebrew, and the person was translating it into English. And at one point, the fellow translated something that Moshe said, and Moshe looked at him and said, "Ze lo ma she'amarti." That's not what I said. He understands enough English. He doesn't speak in English because he doesn't feel comfortable in it, that he can communicate properly, but he knows enough to know what's being said. I drove him once to Bnei Brak, and Ami Cohen had the schus of having him with me. He actually arranged for me to be able to drive from Moshe. And we were driving to Bnei Brak, and he kept giving me directions in English. Here, left. Go right. Yeah. So afterwards, I said to Ami, he says, he thinks I'm too stupid to understand the Hebrew. He goes, nah, he's showing off. So you know enough English. But when you translate, was it the Panovich Rav, I think it was, who spoke for like 5 minutes, and the Rav said over what he said for 20 minutes. And the Panovich Rav says, "Wow, I didn't know I said that much." Because people add commentary just to try to be honest and loyal is not the word I'm looking for, felicitous to the words that the person is saying. That takes a special skill to be able to be as accurate as possible. And so a translation always has within it a certain problem. So when we translated the Torah into Greek, there's no way. That's why he says it was as bad as the day the luchos were broken. Why? Because when HaKadosh Baruch Hu made the first luchos, those luchos were made by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And so they were infinite. And they could hold all of the Torah and all the meanings of the Torah. The second luchos, Moshe made. And so they were not infinite. They couldn't hold an infinite amount of Torah like the first ones could. They were more limited. And once we translate the Torah into Greek, you don't need a chachamim to tell you now what it's supposed to be and what it's supposed to mean. And that's a big problem. You know the story where this non-Jew comes to Shammai and says, "I will convert on condition that you only teach me the Torah shekbiksav and not the Torah shebal peh, only the written Torah and not the oral Torah." And Shammai says, you don't dictate terms. That's not how it works here. If you want to become a Jew and you want to learn Torah, I'll teach you, but don't fool around with me. So he goes to Hillel, and Hillel says, sure. First lesson. See this letter? It's an aleph. See that letter? It's a beis. Okay, come back tomorrow. We'll start again. So he comes back tomorrow and he points to the aleph and says, this is a beis. And he points to the beis and says, this is an aleph. And he says, yesterday you said the opposite. He says, you mean you need an oral tradition just to know what the letters are? And you think you're going to learn Torah without an oral tradition? And so the fellow says, good gesagt, because don't try converting to Judaism unless you know Yiddish. Good gesagt, So, so go ahead. Let's hear, So he came around when he understood that. So if a person wanted to learn Torah, you understand that it has to go through the Jewish people who can explain it. And people who are interested in twisting things around for their own purposes, it's not Torah anymore. And now that it was in Greek and everyone could read it without understanding it, that was a terrible tragedy, because now the Torah was open to Bible criticism and misinterpretation. Thomas Paine in The Age of Reason points out that the Bible says that the rabbit and the hare have chew their cud and don't have split hoofs. And he said, but everyone knows the rabbit and the hare do not chew their cud. They don't have multiple stomachs. They excrete pellets of undigested grass and then eat it again. But that's not the same thing as chewing your cud. So he's right. But he was working with an English translation of a Latin translation of a Greek translation of the Torah. And the Torah says a shafan and an arneves, which people chose to translate as a rabbit and a hare. But the Gemara itself clearly says that whatever these two animals are no longer extant. We don't know what they are. But nobody ever claimed they were a rabbit and a hare. So someone decided to translate it that way, and then the translation continued to grow until therefore he turns around and wants to slug up the Torah based on a translation of a translation of a translation of an original text that we said you needed oral tradition to understand in the first place. So that was one tragedy. And the other tragedy, of course, is that we lost Nevuah. And the Hanukkah story could not have taken place if there was Nevuah, because the Greeks who introduced to the world atheism could only do that because there was no more Nevuah. While there was Nevuah, you can't say there's no God, because I'm in direct contact with him. Now it's not there anymore to the same extent. We've lost that. And of course, Yashka brought to the world a twisted version of Judaism that was then used to attack the Jews. It's always amazing. The Christians are intent on converting Jews. We're not really intent on converting Christians. It's just the opposite. When a Christian comes to us and says, I want to become a Jew, we do the best we can to talk them out of it. But they will use all kinds of interesting methods, if you are familiar with the Spanish Inquisition, to induce Jews to become Christians. Yeah, Muslims as well. It's very important to them that we accept their version, and they're prepared to do whatever needs to be done to make that happen, which is a tragedy, obviously, that happened when he came into the world, and he took it in a completely different direction. So that was the 9th, and then, of course, the 10th was Sar B'Teves. They surrounded the Beis HaMikdash. Surrounded Yerushalayim, I should say. And then our impact is limited. Eventually, they broke through the walls, eventually destroyed the Beis HaMikdash. Eventually, they took the Jews into gullus, and that was the end of Malchus. Because the Malchus of the Jewish people was the Malchus of the world. Shlomo Melech, it says, ruled over the entire world. And that was the Malchus. Afterwards, in the time of his son Rechavam, the Malchus split in half. Ashur took away the northern kingdom, but Malchus based Dovid, which is the Malchus for the end of time. That Malchus was taken by Bavel. Tzidkiyahu was captured, dragged off to Bavel. His children killed in front of him, and then he was blinded. A terrible, terrible story from start to finish. And Nebuchadnezzar took the Malchus from Bnei Israel. That's the first Malchus. That's the first of the Daled Malchios, because the Daled Malchios take our Malchus and pass it on. Eventually, Bavel was destroyed by the Persian Empire. Paras Umadai, they were sort of like, if you remember in the 1800s, there was the Austrian-Hungary Empire, where there were two empires working together. Every now and then, Czechoslovakia were two countries, Czech and Slovakia, that joined together, even though they were two different racial groups and things like that. Forget about Yugoslavia, which was a large collection of very, very small countries that afterwards, when Yugoslavia fell apart, they all made themselves into little independent countries. But Paras and Madai worked together. Some people count Paras and Madai as two, some count them as one. But that is where the Purim story takes place. So Bavel, during the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, it says during his reign, no one ever smiled. Bavel was the seat of power in the world and held that position for a very long time until Paras and Madai took it over. And that was Achashverosh, who was a Persian king. And that's, of course, when the Purim story takes place. And he keeps saying throughout, Ad Chatzia Malchus, I'll give you till half the kingdom, but not the Beis HaMikdash. Somehow, I don't know, he didn't even know Esther was Jewish there. But he made it very clear, this you don't get. Yeah? So that's Bavel, and that's Paras. And then we go into Yavan, the Greeks. Alexander the Great defeated Darius, the king of Persia, the Battle of Arbela. And the Greeks basically ruled the world after that. And eventually, the Greeks were destroyed by the Romans. The Roman Empire managed to destroy Carthage in the Punic Wars, then set their attention to Greece, destroyed Greece, and bit by bit captured the world up until basically Babylon and Persia, that area, the Parthian Empire. They never captured them, and they never captured the Germanic tribes to the north. It's so interesting that French is based largely on Latin. So is Spanish, so is Portuguese, obviously Italian. A lot of the language are called Romance languages, not because they're romantic, but from Rome, and they spread. German doesn't have any Latin influence in it at all. English, surprisingly, is a combination of French and German, because with a smattering of Celtic. Irish and Welsh and Scottish are Celtic languages. So there's a little bit of Celtic in English, like the DW words, so dwarf, right? Things like that. That's left over from Celtic. There are certain words in Celtic, but the Anglo-Saxons are Germans, right? Saxony, Anglia. So they came across and captured England from the Celts, and they made it a German country for the most part, until the Normans invaded in 1066. Easy date to remember. I had an English student, and he says every English student has to remember two dates in history, 1066 and 1966. 1066 is when William the Conqueror captured England from the Anglo-Saxons, King Alfred, and made modern England. That's when they start counting their kings from the Norman conquest. And 1966 was the last time England won the World Cup. For Americans, that's something they do with soccer. I don't know exactly what it is. And, obviously we as Americans could care less. But if I live here in Israel, when the World Cup is on, the whole country closes down. Almost every country in the world, when the World Cup is going on, the whole country closes down. We take one American baseball team and play another American baseball team and call it the World Series. We don't care about anybody else. We look at it from our own point of view, as you can imagine. But in any event, they came in speaking French. So the combination of German and French is what English is, modern English, what we would call it. So that since the Anglo-Saxons were reduced to the peasants, if you ever saw the movie of Robin Hood, Saxon Dog. So the Normans were in charge, so they spoke French. So that's why the word for house in French is Mansion, and the word in German is Haus. And that's why if you have a simple house, it's a Haus. And if you have a fancy house, it's a mansion, because that was the way that the words all work together, That's the silent GH in words in English, like light and night and right, because they were originally German, Licht and nicht and recht. And eventually they got rid of the ch. But the GH, which represented the ch, stayed in the word just to be able to make it more difficult to spell. Anyway, so that's where it came from. But England was captured by the Romans at one point, but they didn't really change the Celtic character of it much. I refer you for the historical information to the comics about Asterix, which was taking place in England with the Druids. That was the Romans trying to convert the Celtics, but didn't work too well. And New York didn't do so well with the Celtics either. But anyway, so but that's Rome came and took over everything. Their power was beyond belief what they were able to do. And they took the Malchus from Greece, who took it from Paras, Modai, who took it from Bavel. And Rome maintained it. It's very interesting that I think it's already in the Rishonim, might be the Achronim. I'm trying to remember what the original source was. But in the vision of Nebuchadnezzar, there's a golden head, that was Bavel, silver body, chest, and then the legs were made out of bronze, and then the feet were made out of cherished, out of clay, and that's Rome. And it's I remember who's the original source for this, but points out that 2 feet have 10 toes. And the Roman Empire turned into 10 other kingdoms that all maintained the power of Rome. I don't remember which ones they were listed. But you know that the Tsar of Russia, Tsar is just a form of Caesar. And Kaiser in Germany is just a form of Caesar. And Romania was called that because of Rome. So the idea of the Roman Empire and its impact continued through these other 10 countries. And although the Roman Empire itself ceased to exist, this is a historian's joke, right? When they talk about the Holy Roman Empire, they say it wasn't holy, it wasn't Roman, and it wasn't an empire. But whatever Malchus today has any control over us, it's just seen as an extension of the Roman Empire. That Malchus that they took from the Greeks, who took it from the Persians, who took it from Bavel, who took it from us, that's our Malchus. And we're the ones who have Malchus, the real Malchus in the world, and it's in exile. Those are the Daled Malchios. Obviously, Christianity and the Malchus became fused at some point. That was Constantine, who went to battle with the cross, into battle, and eventually he converted to Christianity, and then he made the Council of Nicaea to be able to try to iron out all the philosophical differences in Christianity in order to make it something that he could spread that would be clear. His mother, Helena, went to Israel, identified all kinds of Christian spots, and helped to establish the Byzantine churches in Israel and things like that. So certainly that continues over that concept of Malchus. But all of this was taken away from us, and all of this began on Asar B'Teves. So we understand Hanukkah. Hanukkah is the Greeks attempting to impose their philosophy on us. And so Alexander the Great, his kingdom after he died broke apart, and the Ptolemies, who basically ran Egypt and had control of the of Israel until the Syrian Greeks came and captured Israel away from them. So we were caught in between the fight between the Ptolemies and the Seleucids, in Israel, between these two German forces that were working on us. But having said that, on the back and forth and everything that was involved there, Ptolemy is the one who forced us to translate the Torah into Greek. They wanted to force us to take their culture and their philosophy. That's what it was about. But that wasn't, Edom didn't have a philosophy. They just stole whatever was Greek and translated it and made it Roman. But they just wanted power over us. They wanted control, that they could make us do what they wanted. It wasn't religious. They weren't based on anything. Josephus says that the Romans would capture a Jew and try to force him to serve idolatry, and they would torture him to death because they just couldn't believe that anybody would die for their beliefs. It was beyond belief to them. They couldn't see it, and that was the Romans. So that was Greek. Greek was part of the Greek gullus, was to destroy us. The Purim story, which happens in Paras and Madai during that exile, it's not inherent to Paras and Madai. Paras and Madai were not genocidal, crazy people who wanted to destroy the Jews. The only force that wants to completely wipe out the Jews is Amalek. And anytime you find a force that's working to exterminate the Jewish people, Amalek is behind it. It's interesting that when Kaiser Wilhelm II came to visit Israel, he was laying the foundation before the World War I that he wanted the Ottoman Empire to be drawn closer to Germany. And it was fertile ground because Russia kept fighting against the Ottoman Empire and taking away land, and so did England. So Germany was like, we're going to help you, we're going to protect you. So that's how they were able to bring the Ottoman Empire into World War I on the Axis side. So he came to visit in 1898. An interesting little story there, just in case you like Israeli trivia. When you come in to the old city, if you're driving, you drive through what is mistakenly called Shar Yafo, Jaffa Gate. It's not. Jaffa Gate is the gate next to that. That is a break in the wall. And the reason is because Kaiser Wilhelm wanted to ride in through the gate of the city. And there is a Christian tradition that if you ride into the city, you will be considered the conqueror of Jerusalem. So the Turks made a break in the wall and said, here's the gate. They, of course, were laughing to themselves. It was just a breach. He didn't know any better. But nonetheless, you'll see when Allenby, they have a newsreel of General Allenby, when the British captured Israel and he walks into Jerusalem, he gets off his horse and walks in, does not ride in on his horse for that reason. But when Kaiser Wilhelm came, so people came out to make a bracha. And Rabbi Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld would not go out and make the bracha because he was a king. And Kaiser was a king. He wouldn't make the bracha. And he says, I have a tradition that the Germans today are Amalek. That's what he said. And they explains why they have all the classic signs of Amalek, etc. So the fact that Nazi Germany wanted to exterminate the Jews, most people did not want to exterminate the Jews. They wanted to take our money. Occasionally they would exile us. There would be an occasional pogrom, but there was not, they wanted to convert us, but there wasn't a systematic attempt to destroy us, except for the Nazis. And it made no sense. If you saw the video of the talk from Yisrael Stark, he was in a labor camp where the Allies were bombing all of the industrial capacity of Germany and was making it very hard for them to make armaments. So he was in a work camp where they were building an underground factory to be able to manufacture goods. They had Jews working in factories that was manufacturing essential war efforts. And nonetheless, they would take them out and kill them and ship them off to Auschwitz, because destroying the Jews was more important to them than winning the war. Otherwise, use them as slave labor. But you wouldn't exterminate them. You'd work them to death, as was often the case. But why would you exterminate them? It's not in the war effort. But they didn't care about that. Their main effort was destruction. And that was Haman's agenda. It was not Achashverosh. It was not the kings of Persia. And in fact, when we came back to rebuild the Beis Hamikdash, the Persians gave us permission, and the Persians were the ones who were protecting us. We were under the protection of Koresh, Cyrus the Great, who gave us permission to return. So it's not, Paras is not inherently destructive and wants to destroy the Jewish people. But Haman was from Amalek. And whenever Haman joins together with Achashverosh, that is Amalek joining together with the Malchus that they took from us to get them the power to do what they want to do, which is to destroy us. And so Torquemada was able to pressure Ferdinand and Isabel to do the expulsion from Spain. Apparently, they didn't want to, because the Jews were essential to the economy. They understood this. They knew it was in their best interest. People who are rational always know that the Jews are a bounty when they move in someplace. Casimir the Great invited the Jews to come to Poland for that reason. He knew they would build up Poland. When Suleiman the Magnificent captured, during his victorious campaign, he invited the Jews, especially those who were expelled from Spain, to come to the Ottoman Empire. That's when Svas was settled, by a lot of the exiles from Spain. That's when Salonika, the port, was established in Greece. It was so filled with Jews that the port was closed on Shabbos. It was one of the biggest ports in the world. And the Jews had built it up because that's what Jews do when they come into society. So for Hitler to kill them, it didn't make any sense. And the Persians would not have destroyed the Jews. They would have taxed them. They would have this, they would have that, whatever they're going to do, whatever people... I share with you an insight from my wife, which is keen. There was a period of time when we had this impression that everybody on the right liked us, right? That's changed. Now, Candace Owens is anti-Semitic, and Tucker Carlson is anti-Semitic, and Megyn Kelly is anti-Semitic, and all these people who were like our supporters and people we could count on have all turned on us. And my wife says, because you have to remember, at the end of the day, they're goyim. So there'll be an exceptional guy like Marco Rubio. There'll be an exceptional guy like Victor Davis Hanson. There'll be an exceptional guy like Douglas Murray. But, halacha, Esav Sonei is Yaakov. And, when it's in their interest to be nice to us, they'll be nice to us. When it's in their interest not to be nice to us, they won't. And they are a very thin reed to lean on. And the fact that they turn on us is not surprising. So I hope that answers the question. The role of a Haman or any other anti-Semite inside of a government. Malchus does not want to destroy the Jews. Malchus wants to do whatever is good for their government. I believe it was Lord Asquith, I'm not positive, I think, in England, who said, "We have neither allies nor enemies, only national interests. And if it serves our purpose to be good to you, we'll be good to you. And if it serves our interest to turn on you, we'll turn on you." But Amalek, when you see somebody comes up with a single-minded devotion to killing us and destroying us, that's the force of Amalek. And they don't care if they destroy themselves in the process. Okay, producer Ari sent us some appreciation comments. Thank you, Rabbi Orlofsky, for your episode, Sad. I think it contained exactly what I needed to hear. I felt like Hashem was speaking directly to me through your voice. That happens a lot. I am the voice of God. He's taller than I am. But anyway, you said you hoped the podcast cheered people up. It actually made me cry, but in a good way. I think the episode bears listening to on repeat. and I intend to do so. The episode electrified me, and I can hardly find the words to thank you. Rabbi Orlofsky's approach to Yiddishkeit and to life in general is exactly what I want to hear. I connect to it, and I gain so much from listening. You have given me, and surely many of you listeners, such chizik perspective and encouragement. May you have the health, strength, and ability to continue spreading the light and warmth of Torah for many years to come, and may you and your family have bracha, hatzlacha, and siyata d'shmaya at Meves from Shanim. Many thanks, a faithful and grateful listener. L'chvod Rabbi Orlofsky Shlita, I've been listening to you for years. You are my go-to at every point. But your latest podcast, Sad, was beyond amazing. I got a lot of reaction to that. A lot of reaction. A special thank you to the one who sponsored it. They get a lot of schusim. I heard you discuss this topic before, and I always go back to it in my mind whenever I need a boost. But you broke it down on a whole new level here, and it was such a chizik, and I am sure it was for others as well. Hashem should give you many years to continue doing this in good health. Wow. Thank you, Rabbi Orlofsky, for the show. It makes a difference to my life. The last show, Sad, was a wow. That's in capitals. It was a light bulb moment. I felt like I need to listen to it every day because most of it is things I know, but I need to hear, to feel it, and to believe it like your online people say to you, I know there is a God, I just don't believe it. So I know he loves me and is impressed with me for how hard I try, but I don't believe it. I've already listened to it several times, and it is so helpful. P.S. Watership Down is amazing. I had to force myself to put it down so I could stretch it over a few days. Thank you for the suggestion. And thank you to everyone who's involved with making this show happen. Thank you to everyone who is responsible for making the show happen. Thank you to our sponsors. Thank you to our sponsors for Parsha and 5. Thank you to our sponsors on the question and answer. And thank you to our producers and our film crew and the people who handle all the administrative work. And there's so many people who go into it. I actually do the least amount of work. I just sit here and talk, which I do all the time. It's just they film it for an hour a week, but I'm just always sitting here in this chair. You can walk in anytime, and I'm sitting in this chair just talking to myself. And I have to tell you, for everybody who gets chizik, I'm going to say it again. We are making a Pesach program in the Nov Kinneret. The contact information is on the screen. Go to Castles Travel. It's probably the most inexpensive Pesach program you're going to find. It's definitely cheaper than going to Orlando. My gosh, that cost a fortune. Or going to a big fancy hotel. And it's going, I mean, anyone who thinks they get chizik, trust me, this is going to be chizik on steroids. Now, this is, I've been planning this for 25 years, my Pesach program. And I have so many ideas and things that I want to do to give you the best Pesach experience you can. Please come and join us. We're going to have, for people from America, there's second day davening, second day Sudas, second Seder. We have the 8th day of Pesach. And since it finishes Thursday night, we have a Shabbos add-on for anybody who wants to come and stay. And you can come the night of B'dikas Chametz. We have an add-on. It's going to be just such a great program. I really hope that as many people who can take advantage come. Bring your kids, bring your family, bring your parents, bring your cousins. You know, it's going to be a lot of fun and deeply meaningful and exciting. So that's it for this week. If you want to find out more about this show, or to sign up for the hotel in Pesach, or to sponsor an episode, or a Parsha and 5, or a question and answer, or to submit a question, or to leave a comment, please go to my website, RabbiOrlofsky.com. And that's it for this week. Until next time, I am David Orlofsky, and this has been the Rabbi Orlofsky Show.
It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Torah and Simcha, ready to go. The Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Knowledge and wisdom will help you grow. Lots of fun in every episode, and we don't have to rhyme. No, we don't. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show on RabbiOrlofsky.com. Torah, anytime, YouTube and more. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Torah and Simcha, ready to go. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Till next time, till we meet again. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show.